Hello, everyone, and welcome to Terrible Movies with Wonderful People. This week we watched Highlander. Yes, Highlander. I know there's going to be some people who object to me calling this a terrible movie, and get in the comments. We can discuss it. By the end of this, at least I hope you understand why we watched it, even if you don't agree that it is a terrible movie. Highlander came out in 1986. I didn't get to see it in the movie theater. My parents just didn't take me to see it. But we did rent it as soon as it came out. I think that was 1987. I would have been 11 years old. Anyway, I was immediately hooked. It's a beautiful film. It's absolutely gorgeous, or at least most of it is. There's immortality, there's sword fights, there's good versus evil, there's beautiful women, there's mysticism. It really is a film that captures you when you watch it. The Kurgan's an awesome bad guy. He is really good. Uh, Highlander 2, of course, was a letdown, but I've actually rewatched Highlander many times over the years. If I find it either on a pay channel or I'm in a hotel room watching cable and it's on, I'll watch it, even with commercials. That doesn't change the fact, though, that it had issues. First of all, it tanked at the box office. Absolutely tanked. And I don't mean that it didn't live up to expectations. It was expected to make 150 million and it only made 85. Nothing like that. It actually lost money. The film was shot on a budget of about 19 million, and of course, the film shooting budget does not generally include P&A and other advertising costs that are incurred on the run-up of the film. But it was shot on a budget of 19 million and it made 12.8 million. So it lost just over $6 million at the box office. And I know we've all seen, or most of us have seen, Highlander. So how did it lose money? Nobody saw it until it came out on video. It was released on March 6th of 1986. And not only did nobody go see it, but the critics really didn't get it either. They didn't like it. Right now on Rotten Tomatoes, it has a score of 70%, but that's basically it's mostly based on re-reviews. The contemporary critics were not kind. As a matter of fact, it still has a score of 24 on Metacritic, which is based more on contemporary reviews. And so you can see that not only did nobody go to see it, but critics didn't like it either. And then finally, if we're being fair, we have to talk about the casting. The main character is a Scotsman, but he's played by a Frenchman who was learning English while shooting the movie. And while he did have both an English coach and a dialect coach, he could only do so much with his accent. His mentor is an Egyptian pretending to be a Spaniard and played by a Scotsman, and he never hides his accent. And then you have Clancy Brown, who is so perfectly cast as the Kurgan that it actually does sort of highlight how miscast the other two roles really are. So definitely wasn't a hit at the time. It is definitely now a cult classic. It found its audience in home video, and it continues to stream today. It stars Christopher Lambert, Sean Connery, Clancy Brown, Roxanne Hart, and Beatty Edney. It's directed by Russell Mulcahy, who was a music video director before this film. The story is by Gregory Wyden, and it was written by Gregory Wyden, Peter Bellwood, and Larry Ferguson. The cinematography is by Jerry Fisher and Tony Mitchell, and you will see some really gorgeous shots, especially the ones in Scotland. And the music is by Michael Kamen, and a special shout out to this soundtrack. Queen got to see an early cut of the movie because they were going to write one song for the movie. But they actually liked it so much that each member of Queen wrote a song for the movie, and the soundtrack is much the better for it. It is a spectacular soundtrack. The movie runs 116 minutes on the theatrical release, and it is rated R. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching the film, and now I hope you enjoy listening to my panel of wonderful people talk about it. All right, everybody, that was Highlander. Hope you guys enjoyed it. That was weird as fuck. You are right, Anxiety Possum. So our wonderful people are here, and I will go ahead and pull them in. Okay, so that was Highlander. We watched Highlander 2 a while ago. Jason wanted to watch Highlander. So I'm going to run down the reasons why this movie is on the list, not from a like it, didn't like it, or critical perspective, but just from a how does this qualify? Generally, we go by critical reviews and or attendance and reception. Critically, this was reviewed terribly when it came out. Critics hated this movie. The metadata score is a 21, which is low as hell. Attendance was terrible for this movie. It was a $19 million movie to film, and they only made $12.8 million, so a little bit less than $13 million. It lost $6 million at the theater. So, by those two standards, this is a terrible movie. So what we're here to find out is it a terrible movie or a terrible movie? So we're going to discuss that. All right. So, Jason, Carol, what are you guys' thoughts just off the top of your head? Is this terrible or is it terrible?
Ladies first.
Okay, so here's where I get the hate mail. Do I leave this on if I have the remote? Yes, because I'm leaving it on in the background so I can listen to the soundtrack. But this is a terrible film. It's a terrible film that I like and that I own, but it's a terrible film. The acting is all over the place. It's about as all over the place as Christopher Lambert's accent. And the story makes very, very little sense. It is also in very little substance. And the main reason why I will watch this continually is that I love Clancy Brown.
Yeah.
Yep, Mr. Krabs is awesome. But Jason, is this a terrible movie or not?
I love this movie. Now I'm not going to disagree with Carol on a lot of things that she said. Yeah, the acting is all over the place. The cinematography in this film, it's like you can't decide which scenes it's going to be good and which scenes it's not. So they just decided to do both. So you've got some really nice shots here and there, and then you've got some really just bad, highly grainy shots that could have been touched up a little better. A lot of the Foley was bad, particularly on the sword clashes. But I mean, then again, in the 80s, you had that tropey ass clang sword clash thing going on. But I mean, I watched this movie obsessively when I was a kid. So I'll say that in the aspects of what Carol's talking about, yes, absolutely, this is a terrible movie. But it's kind of along the lines of something like Ghostbusters. And before you start, I am that fucking kid that would pretend his book bag was a proton pack. I'm still a massive Ghostbusters fan, so don't go there. In that it has its charm. And it has its moments where you can kind of read between the lines as far as the story jumping all over the place. I mean, it's a neurodivergence dream because everything's happening so fast that you just go with it. You're just like, okay, I'm not going to worry about how she got into the building at the end. Don't care. I'm just going to go with it. Or I'm not going to worry about the timeline, like how long has this time elapsed been? Just go with it, because there's always something going on screen. And that's one thing you can say about this film is it doesn't have its moments where it's just filler.
Right. Does it pass the remote control test?
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm not turning this movie off.
And Carol says it does as well. It definitely passes the remote control test for me. I love this movie. It is absolute mindless fun from start to end.
So, Love Man, I'm gonna disagree with you on that point that you made. The issues when your hero can't die, there's not an element of vulnerability. Um, I feel like Connor was very vulnerable the entire film. I mean, obviously, the cutting the head off thing, but he led with his emotions so much that oftentimes it would cloud his judgment. I mean, if you look at the other immortals that he was facing, they I mean, even the Kurgan put all that shit aside. The Kurgan didn't really screw up until he let emotions cloud him until he got angry at the end and realized, okay, well, this is a fuck.
So let's talk about overall impression. And you guys will notice I did not open this the way I normally do. Usually I open this movie with quotes. This is not a super quotable movie. I mean, there can be only one, of course, but that's about it. It's a kind of magic as a callback, but
Yeah.
It's not a super quotable movie. As a matter of fact, the dialogue, other than Sean Connery's, is mostly forgettable.
Is Sean Connery's memorable? I remember more of what the Kurgan says.
Well,
yeah. The Kurgan is fun. It's better to flame out than fade away. There's a few things, but do you guys disagree? Do you have favorite quotes from this movie?
No, it's not something that, it's not like Holy Grail where I'm constantly quoting the damn thing.
Yeah, no, that totally not a highly quotable movie other than there can
unless
be
you're quoting the songs.
Yes.
Who Wants to Live Forever? The rest of the Queen additions to the soundtrack are spectacular. And I'm going to start first with overall impression. My overall impression of this movie is I will sit there and let it run just to hear the soundtrack. If I could not see the movie, I would still let it run.
Mm-hmm.
If the screen on my TV was broken and I somehow found Highlander, it would stay on my TV. Or I'd go
that's
listen
what
to
I think about. That's what I think about this movie. I think it's given a pass because it has a killer soundtrack.
Oh, now she's saying it's given a pass.
It is. It's given a pass because it's got a killer soundtrack. It's got some interesting concepts, but it's painfully obvious it's directed by a guy who specialized in music videos, because
the whole movie's a music video.
It's just one long Queen music video.
All right.
Yeah. I'll sit glued to it. I mean, I love everything about this film, and you're right to cut me off at times because I can talk about this film for hours. So yes, the soundtrack is absolutely killer. I like the story. Actually, I do think there are a lot of times where they could have done better in presenting it. So the actual storytelling can be off at times, but overall, yeah, this isn't something that I would let sit in the background. This is something, if it's on, I'm glued to it. I'm shut down. I mean, you saw how much I was not commenting tonight.
Okay, so forget the scenes, forget the content, forget the effects. Mm-hmm. The scenes are beautifully shot. I mean, Carol, even you have to agree with that.
Some of them.
What's that?
Some of them.
Well,
a fair number of them, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not saying he's not a talented director. I'm just saying this is a lot of style.
Now, when they were living in the chess rook, and the night that the Kurgan showed up, that was obviously a matte background that they had painted.
Yeah.
But
and suddenly that castle turned into styrofoam.
Yes. Why were they living in a chess piece?
I don't know. They just found it, I guess.
Honestly, in ancient Scotland, it wouldn't be unusual to come across old battlements and whatnot. So, I mean, that's
but I don't know if an
plausible.
Outcast from a village would just be allowed to.
Yeah, he's not
house there.
He is definitely not a nobleman.
No. If it's abandoned, nobody's going to give a shit.
Oh,
not way back then.
I would disagree. One, it wouldn't have been as old way back then. But two, if they built it, they pretty much care about it. Things didn't really get abandoned like that.
Some monastery would have copped that up, but
yep.
Yeah.
I'm willing to let that go because it was a cool.
It was a cool chess piece they were living
It looked cool.
Yeah.
Other things other things just don't make sense. I mean, Heather dies and he burns down his farm. Why?
I don't know.
How long do you want me to go on for? Because
we're talking just this movie. We're not talking the entire Highlander series.
No, I'm not talking the series. I mean, like, I can see where he's coming from on that. He's immortal. He's never going to die. So her passing away and him staying on that farm, that's going to be a constant reminder. But
why
I mean,
keep the farm at all?
Right. So burn it down
Conor
and move
McLeod's
on.
actions in this film just don't make any sense.
You do realize that burning something down is not the only way to move on from it, right?
He gives up, and his character is manically depressed. And I think Christopher Lambert played that really well, especially when it got to the modern day scenes, where it's not enough for him to just walk away. He needs to make sure that he can never go back to it.
I just nothing he did really made a whole lot of sense to me. And I found it incredibly creepy that he just kept a little girl and raised her to work for him.
And she was obviously in love with him.
Yeah, that was super creepy.
There's actually been some fan theories that at some point Conor and Rachel did have a relationship.
That's even creepier.
All right, but issues. So let's just talk about the issues that this movie has. And let's start with where does he keep that damn sword? You can't sit that way. You cannot sit that way and not have the sword either go straight down your leg with his knee bent. It would have made the coat go out, or have it come up and come up to your shoulder. There's not when he's sitting.
The intergalactic butthole theory.
Yes, the intergalactic butthole theory. Anyway, the only reason he got caught was because he was stupid. You don't throw your sword up on top of something and then drive like a bat out of hell. You put the sword back in your intergalactic butthole, and then you go back into the freaking venue and drive normally on your way out.
Watching the wrestling.
Yeah.
Yes.
Walk out with everyone else.
Unless he figured that getting caught was part of his escape plan and he severely miscalculated.
Okay, he's been alive for 400 years. He can't be that stupid. He can't be that stupid.
Can't he?
We know some people, Mark.
Right. So then he's leaving. The police have no idea what's happened yet. There's no way they found that body. He jumps in his car and he peels out like a bat out of hell. Yet they pull him out at gunpoint like they know he's a murderer. That was just wrong. And then, wow, the movie just went homophobic real quick.
Yes.
Just
boom.
Welcome to the 80s.
Yeah, that is so indicative of the era, and I am not defending it or saying it's okay.
Now let's get to the lead actress. Her character. One, the writers seem to confuse tenacity and stupidity. And that is a common thing. If you're going to be tenacious, then they have to make you dumb about everything else so that you'll walk into whatever plot point that they need you to walk into. Oh, they let him go because they had nothing on him. He managed to cut that man's head off and get no arterial spray on him whatsoever.
Which
None.
Is not accurate, because if you cut somebody with a sword, that is going to be a messy situation. There's going to be blood everywhere.
But that's
not
not
bleed like normal people, though. I mean, when Ramirez sliced Kurgan's throat, was there any blood?
Yeah.
There was blood on the sword, and then all of a sudden there wasn't.
Yeah.
There was one scene going up the stairs where Ramirez has blood on his sword, and then he doesn't. Anyway, what I want to know is how he got from Egypt to Japan.
Slowly.
He's immortal.
He said he was like 4,000 years old. So
yeah, he's immortal. I mean, he's got time. Shit, he probably walked.
The people in Egypt didn't necessarily know about Japan at the time he was there.
I'm sure he just started walking and found it.
Yeah, I mean, if you
Can't walk to
think about it,
Japan.
you can live forever. You literally have all of eternity.
He just walked on the bottom of the ocean. He can't
You
drown.
you can just walk, and eventually you're going to come across something.
Mhm.
So I can see that.
So when he gets
You
to the
know?
edge of the world and it's all flowing down onto the turtles that are carrying it, the turtle is carrying it. Do you bounce off the turtle and fall forever? You just walk right off. Oh shit! That's an elephant. Bye.
I just want to know how, in all of his travels from Egypt to Japan to Spain, he came up with a Scottish accent.
Yes, and a Spanish name.
Okay, so let's talk about the accents for a second, because for me, Connor's was more believable, and this is why.
oh, you were really pulling that out of your ass, sir.
Oh no! Check it. So, Ramirez's accent was straight up full on Scottish. Connor's accent, outside of his, I'm not talking about Connor in the Village. I'm talking about modern day Connor. Connor in the Village that needed work. He's been alive for over 400 years. In that time, or longer. In that time, he's spent so much time around all these other accents that over time, it's fucked with his accent. So it's not a really kind of a nondescript accent anymore.
Let me
like
catch
he
up
can't
with the
decide
comments
which was to go.
All I can say is he has been in the United States because he was at Boston Common since the 1700s. Now,
which at the time, everyone would have had British accents still, because we had just been colonized over.
I have been stationed in Charleston, South Carolina. I was stationed there. I don't know why I can't get that right. Anyway, 6 months after I got to Charleston, I was speaking with some Charleston accent.
Mm-hmm.
When I got down to Orlando, I started losing my Southern accent.
Mm-hmm. You pick up different things.
Yes,
I mean,
but you're not going to pick up a nondescript European accent living in the United States for 200 years. That is.
I mean, who said he spent that entire 200 years in the United States? And again, we're a melting pot. So you figure everybody around the 1700s they were going to have British accents, and then over time you
British
see
accent,
more.
Sir.
You have more immigration coming in from Ireland, Scotland, France. So it's a mishmash. I'm not saying it was perfect.
You are parsecking his accent, sir.
I'm saying that his modern day accent was more explainable than his accent back when he was, in Scotland. You know what I'm saying?
At least with Ramirez, he could say, I got to Scotland, I decided to start talking with a Scottish accent.
But dressing like a Spaniard.
And telling the first person that, oh yeah, and I'm not really Spanish, I'm Egyptian. Right. And my last wife was Japanese. Mm-hmm, and I've got this sword that is folded 200 times, but the Japanese weren't doing that until the 14th century.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. But anyway.
You're trying to make the history work, and the history doesn't work here.
Yeah.
I love this movie, but I do not think that we need to parsec. And if you guys don't know what I mean, people have retconned that the parsec means that the engine on the Millennium Falcon was strong enough to take a more direct path than any other ship, and that the way they made the Kessel Run in 14 parsecs was they were able to navigate the shortest path possible. They have, and what our dear friend Jason here is doing is trying to come up with the same kind of bullshit explanation for the problems in this movie so that he can go on believing that it's a great movie.
See, I knew I was going to catch a ration of shit tonight because of this movie.
Hey, your friend threatened to kick my ass.
I'm going to give Christopher Lambert a pass on his accent because he was just learning English.
Yep, he had an English coach. I'm not going to give him a
pass on his acting though, because his acting in this movie is shit.
I feel like had they had, frankly, better actors, had they had a bit more money, and a director who knew what he was doing outside of music videos, that they really could have had something here. And they did have something. They just didn't realize it until it went to video. I will say that, like, I actually do have, I was a fan of the series too. And I actually do have Duncan McLeod's sword.
It's called The Hunted, and it came out in 1995.
Yes. Yes.
Yep. But yeah, Jason, and I'm not attacking you. I just like busting your chops. But
Oh no.
yeah, I'm gonna have to say that storytelling through dialogue was not this director's main
No.
goal.
No.
Can you imagine if someone like Steven Spielberg had helmed this film, or James Cameron?
No.
Probably more of a Steven Spielberg feel to it. Can you imagine what this film could have been?
It would have been PG.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not wrong there.
Let's get to some tropes here. And
Okay.
the
Every female character.
God.
Okay, so
Every female character in this movie was dumb as fuck.
Yes.
Yep.
And that is problematic for me, because even as a kid, I liked my strong female leads. Even my femme fatales needed to have some smarts to them and some strength to them. And none of the women in this movie had the brains God gave a beer can. This was that, and I'm not going to argue this movie is misogynist as hell at all.
They introduced one black character and then immediately killed him.
Yeah. Oh, and he's African.
Yeah.
That's not problematic. But in the 80s, we didn't think about that shit.
No.
Again, not making it okay, but shit. Winston Zedmore got, he was the Ghostbuster. He was the character that got like the most screen time in the 80s, the black character.
Yeah. I also like how after the quickening, which I have a problem with the quickening in and of itself because it makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
There's only two of them left at the end. So
there's only two of them left at the end. So think about how much knowledge that Kurgan has amassed and how much power he's amassed over the centuries. He's been killing off other immortals.
I know everything.
Yeah. I mean, that when it's down to two of them, that made sense because the type of character Conor is, I very seriously doubt that he's taken down even a fraction of the number of immortals that the Kurgan's taken down.
The cops are assholes for no reason. The captain's dumb. The guys are unnecessarily skeevy around the women. Servants must love their masters. I hate that one. That's one of those ones. People are happy to serve. I don't believe it.
I also like how the cops just kind of stop investigating the deaths after Kurgan dies.
Yep.
I guess the beheadings are no longer investigated.
Unnecessary backflips are unnecessary.
Yes.
Which was done way better in The Princess Bride, by the way.
Yeah.
Character does something stupid just to further the plot. I'm not sure if it was leaving his sword or putting his car, taking his car out of there like a bat out of hell, or if it was her following him. The tenacity, stupidity thing was just stupid. Get out. Nobody gets out when they yell get out.
No,
Why
please.
can't one person please just get out?
Heather had like freaking half an hour to get out of that damn castle and run.
Yes.
Yeah. And I see there, like, the males are unnecessarily skeevy to women.
Yep.
And that goes back to my comment, like, yeah, no, I'm not going to argue. This movie is misogynist as fuck. Like, bad misogynist.
Anything else? The aristocracy is needlessly cruel.
His assistant made him look like a fool in his eyes. So, got him down.
Yep.
Yeah.
And did he shoot him in the ass?
Yeah, I think he shot him in the ass.
Yeah. I don't think it was a death shot.
I guess Mark isn't a fan of driving Miss Daisy. She was kind to him. She was kind to him and respected him. That's not the same thing. Mcleod survived a stabbing. He must be possessed. Oh, yeah. Everybody in the 14th century thinks whatever they don't understand is a witch. Burn it.
Mm-hmm.
If it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, it's a witch. Burn her.
But I mean, on the flip side, look at the Salem witch trials. That kind of tracks. Now, I don't know how puritanical Scotland was at the time. I do know that in England, the puritanical rule there at that time totally would have gone that angle of, oh, that's unnatural, it must be Satan.
Now, the Puritans were actually being kicked out of England at that time, because that was what, 15?
No, you're not. That was like 15 something.
Yeah, so they were on their way.
You're not wrong. Yeah, you're not
they're
wrong.
very close to being on their way to being in America.
All right, so I'm gonna try to limit you to a minute or two each on these, Jason.
Sorry.
No, just Jason. Best scene, worst scene.
Okay, Carol, go first because I'm gonna need a minute to narrow it down.
Okay, best scene is probably Kurgan in the church, just because it looks like Clancy Brown's having just so much fun torturing nuns.
Yep.
And Christopher Lambert. Worst scene, oh gosh. I'm gonna go with Ramirez's death because Heather is just such a useless character at that point. And she just sits there and then she's raped for no reason because it doesn't even forward Conor's story at all because he doesn't even know about it. It's a completely useless plot point. Okay. But it's something that the bad guy was supposed to do in the 80s, so it happened.
Anxiety Possum says that the sex scene is the worst scene. It was unneeded, you're right, but at least it wasn't.
At least it was consensual.
Yeah, it was consensual.
Yeah,
they showed his ass too. For a mid-'80s sex scene, I thought it was well done, though absolutely unnecessary. And without it, it would have been PG, right?
Yeah, incidentally, she just like, wham bam, thank you, dude, and left.
Yes.
And then now she's stuck with him forever.
Yes.
So I hope she was planning on going back to him, because if not, too bad. He knows your every thought. And why would you stay with a guy that knows your every thought? Seriously,
but it was not the hit it and quit it. It was the snoo, zoo, and choo-choo.
Yeah. Yeah.
You said a lot of words, and I don't know what they mean.
Well, they hit it, and then they went to the zoo for some reason, and then she quit it.
Look, it's like somebody had lions, so let's put the lions in the film because cool.
Yes. But who goes to the zoo between the hitting and the quitting?
Oh, the zoo was between that. Okay.
Yeah, the zoo was between the hitting and the quitting.
Yeah.
I do not because it was sex scene, lions roar. Then she's like, you know what? Peace. I'm out.
Don't lose your head.
But she waited till they got back to his place. I'd hit it again. He is pretty.
Yeah.
I will say that. He's a terrible actor, but he is pretty.
Especially.
I think that my favorite scene was the first sword fight with Conor versus the Kurgan when Brenda followed him into the alley.
Oh.
Huh?
Oh, in the alley. Okay.
Yeah, not the one
in
where
the alley.
Not the one in the Highlands where he got immediately stabbed.
Right. Which I thought also was a cool scene because I mean he swung like an idiot, because he was just a kid, had never been in battle before. But I think that scene in the alley, I like how the Kurgan just kind of ambushes him. I feel like it kind of shows that the tension that the movie's trying to convey. I thought that the bit with the cops at the end probably counts as my worst, where they come to the Kurgan and say, both of you freeze, and then the Kurgan runs off like, hey, wait, come back. You're in a helicopter, dude. If that's all you got, I'm taking off. I ain't turning around.
And the Anxiety Possum has given us a bit of advice. If you break up with an immortal man who is basically a superhero, you do it in public in case he goes bonkers.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's good advice. That's kind of like they always break up at dinner, but at the end, you never break up at the beginning of dinner, right?
Yeah,
So
wait till
dinner's
he's paid.
really fucking awkward. I mean, really awkward. And I'd sit there too. She dumped my ass. I'm still gonna have a steak. Hell, even a lobster tail, I think. All right, so we've got some. For me, the best scene. It's weird, but I kind of like the introduction of Ramirez when he hops over them on the horse and he's talking fast and all sure of himself, and I dig that scene. I really dig that scene. The worst scene for me, it's the final quickening. The scene is just cheesy. The final quickening into the voiceover is just that's not my. I didn't like it as an ending, to be completely honest. Clancy in the church is a great scene. Well, when he licks that guy's hand, that is so awesome.
Yeah.
But
I think that we can all agree, though, that the opening scene of this movie, where Sean Connery's reading his bit in the bathroom, by the way, is how he got that echo.
Yes.
He was in a public restroom, and they had him read that intro, and he recorded it and sent it to him, and they didn't realize there was an echo until after they mixed it, and then just figured it worked. But the opening scene where he reads it, you go into the Queen song, and it goes into the wrestling match. That's just fucking great. That's how you open an epic film like this.
Why is Conor Mcleod there?
He didn't seem to enjoy the wrestling much.
No, but he was tracking that other immortal that he was going to kill on the parking deck.
But he didn't even want to kill that guy. Remember? He's like, "Oh, hey." The guy had to take 2 swings at him before Conor was like, "Okay, I'll fight you."
Yeah, well, he was just saying, "Wait, let me pull my sword out." Shit.
I gotta get it out of my butt.
Dude. Yeah. Look, there's a lot of stuff up in there. I need to go find it real quick.
I've got Ramirez's sword. I've got my sword. Give me a minute.
Yeah, is that where you're storing the old Claymore?
Around in there somewhere. Yeah.
All right. Best and worst character.
Mm.
And I'll actually ask a much easier question. Is Conor Mcleod the best character in the movie?
No.
That's all we need to say.
The Kurgan.
Yeah, the Kurgan is.
The Kurgan's the best character.
I think that Clancy Brown had a lot more fun with his role than Christopher Lambert had with his role.
Is any woman in this movie written well enough to be considered a good character?
God, no.
No.
God, no.
No. Candy.
Yeah, you know what? Yes, Candy. Candy is the only woman in this film that's worth a damn, and this is why. Because the actress knew what she was. She knew what that character was about. She had one line. She delivered it well. Done.
Yep.
Okay. The rest of the women, the actresses, you could tell were trying to do what they could with the script that they had, and it just, I'm sorry, the dialogue and everything about those characters, the way they were written, there's no saving that.
So I'm going to switch this up a little bit. Carol, you're not the biggest fan of this movie, so I'm going to ask you what works in this film. And Jason, you're a huge fan. I'm going to ask you what doesn't work. So, right. Carol first.
A lot of the visuals work. There's a lot of cool concepts in this film. I just don't think they're really done well or explained well. And then the music. The music works really, really well. I do think the friendship between Ramirez and Mcleod works for a brief moment, but I think this film is just hampered by the fact that its lead actor doesn't speak English, and you can tell he doesn't speak English. So I'm not sure why you would cast him in this role.
They didn't know. They did not know.
Yeah. To be fair, they had no idea. How do you not
know? Okay, obviously he did an audition.
Yes, he was actually their second choice, but he was picked because of name recognition in Europe at the time. He had just done something, and I can look it up if you want me to, but he had
No.
just done something that had gotten him known, and it got him into it got him into this film. And I can't remember who the first choice was. I can look that up if you want me to, but
Yeah, I'm curious about that one. But the bad guy also works
I
because I do
believe
think the Kurgan actually kind of makes the film.
Patrick Swayze was actually one of the choices that they were looking at. For
it was Greystoke. Christopher
Yeah, but
Lambert
he
had done
didn't-
Greystoke, Legend of Tarzan, which has almost no lines in it, and the director
'Cause he
did
plays,
not realize.
Yeah, he plays Tarzan where
Yes.
he doesn't, but he does speak English when he's back at the manor, when
Yes.
he's back at Greystoke Manor.
But that
So
was
he-
all
he must-
phonetics.
Oh,
yeah,
because
kind
that's
of like
another
Dolph
one. The
Lundgren.
second they put a suit on him, he sounds horrible. So that's
Yeah.
another film that's just, that's the other one where they totally dubbed Andy McDowell
Yeah,
because she had the Southern accent. And so they had Glenn Close dub all of her dialogue.
hmm
That movie's a mess too.
Oh yeah, and it was Mark Singer who was the first choice.
my mom went to college with Andy McDowell. She went to Winthrop University.
Right. But it was Mark Singer who was the first choice for Duncan McLeod.
Why would you
Wow.
not get a Scotsman?
I don't know.
Mm.
All right, but
Who
so
knows?
Jason, what doesn't work in this movie?
Brenda.
Brenda doesn't work.
I mean, it seemed to me like that character was inserted to just kind of push him forward when he really didn't
Needed a
need to
love
be
interest.
pushed forward.
I
Yeah,
want to
she
know
was
is
there because he needed a love interest. No, he didn't. He already had his motivation.
what I really want to know is what conversation did they cut from the movie in which she knows Conor well enough to say, "You're not afraid to die. You're afraid to live." Okay,
Yeah.
it's something pseudo profound, but when did she learn this about him?
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Was it
footage that
between
was cut
stabbing
from
him
this
and fucking
film.
him? Was it
Something
after
like
fucking him
that.
before the lions?
I'm to understand the original cut of this film was encroaching 3 hours. And the director's cut, which is what we just watched, is only another like 7 minutes long.
Yeah, because the original theatrical does not have the scene with Rachel where he finds
No.
Rachel.
No, and in fact, it doesn't really I don't think it really has any of the scenes with Rachel other than the one at the end that I
Yeah.
can remember. You had
You
the
just
one
you
where
see her as just somebody working for him. You don't get that scene where he
Right.
finds her.
right.
The only old scene you get, the only like flashback scene you get technically besides the Highland stuff is the duel.
So,
Mhm.
Best character for Love Man was Ramirez, and I think he was good. Worst character was Brenda. Brenda is just not well written, and somebody
Mhm.
needs to just get out when somebody pleads with you to get out. Somebody needs to do it at some point.
Somebody.
Yep. And then the cheat code
Yeah.
is stabbing a dude and then sexing him. You can learn all his secrets if you stab him and then sex him. I guess
That
it's a
explains
stab.
my scars.
She gets
Thing.
stabbed back. I don't know.
Yeah, I stab you, you stab me.
Yeah.
Hey, I'll stab you all you want. Oh, you mean with a knife? Never mind.
All right. So that is what worked and didn't work. Carol, I'm going to ask you a slightly different version of the last question. Is there a way this could be a good movie?
You'd have to recast it.
Mhm.
You'd have to you'd have to recast it and rewrite all the female characters.
Yes.
And I think they probably did that. I have not watched the television show, but I'm sure they probably did that in the television show and made a
They
much
really
better.
did. They really did not. Even in the television show, I can tell you from memory, the female characters are all chattel. The one female
Well-groomed.
Highlander, the one female immortal that they had, even she was just the minute she laid eyes on Duncan, she was just swooning.
She
So,
did at
yeah.
one point want to jump off of the Eiffel Tower, which I thought was kind of a cool scene.
Right,
Just
right.
to show everybody immortals. There were parts of the Highlander series I really liked. All right, Jason, are there?
Mhm.
What are the parts of this movie that you think people will point to say that it's terrible?
Oh God. I mean, well, I mean, we've already mentioned all the women in this film ad nauseum. I think that a lot of the, uh, frankly, I think a lot of people would want to see more of the Scotland scenes. And I think a lot of people would look at this and say it's kind of really, it's like two movies fighting over one print. They would want to see, something nodding back to the past and then see that laid out as its own movie and then go into Highlander 2 being the modern day fight. But I think the scene that would stand out as a horrible movie is the scene where Brenda goes in to the archive and her buddy lines up all the signatures, because
And
that's
it's
not
like
how that
exact.
works. And he's sitting there going, "Your boyfriend's 200 years old." And
Yeah, that's the first conclusion they're going to draw.
yeah, that's like, okay. No, he would be talking to her like, okay, you're pulling some shit on me because this is showing me that you've got a guy here that's 400 years old. Okay, nice joke. Thank you
Yeah.
for wasting my time. Get the fuck out of my office. You know, I agree with what Carol and Anxiety Possum both saying is, remake it, rewrite it, recast it, modernize it, remake it, because there is a lot of good stuff here. It's
There's a
just
lot of cool
not
concepts.
fleshed right. It's just not fleshed out well.
So I'm going to
I
leave
don't
you with
even
this.
think
Everybody
I
says
don't even think the
Brenda's character.
filmmakers knew what to do with this, considering we made Highlander
No.
2 and Highlander 3, and they
Yeah, we
still
don't.
didn't do anything with
Yeah.
it.
Now I'm going to leave you with this.
Yeah.
Everyone says that Brenda's character doesn't work. And I'm going to submit that she absolutely doesn't work. She pulled one piece of metal out of the column.
Mm-hmm.
She looked at it in the microscope once, and that was all the forensic work she did
Yep.
for the entirety of the movie. One microscope,
Yeah.
one piece of metal. That
How
is.
did you
Found the
know
sword
that?
under a car because apparently the cops didn't,
Yeah, look under the
look.
car.
Yeah. So the cops in this film are dumb as hell. And I'm sorry, but you don't look at a piece of metal under a microscope and go, "Oh, this piece of metal is yay hundreds of years old." That's
Yeah.
not a thing.
No.
So, also, just another note. Nothing that they did with the police was how anything that the police do works.
No.
Now, that is
Not
not
at
a
all.
problem with this movie. This is a problem with a lot of 80s
With a
movies.
lot.
People just assume how the police work and
Mhm.
don't bother getting a consultant. And they end up with stuff like, oh, we're going to show him a picture of the guy we think did it. That you can't do that. You can't have the guy stand up in court and make an identification after you've tainted the identification process. And that goes
Mm-mm.
back way past the mid 80s. Anyway,
Yeah.
Also, can I say that I'm not buying that military guy lived through being skewered by the Kurgan
oh,
and lifted off the ground
Yeah,
and
just-
thrown across the alley?
he put the sword into
No.
him, sharp edges parallel to the ground, which means when he tried to throw him to the side, it would have just sliced right out of him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even at that, let's say it just ended up being a really bad stab wound and didn't slice through him, the paramedics would have to be standing there on the scene, watching the entire time, ready to go because the internal bleeding. Oh God!
Would be massive.
Also,
yeah.
isn't your
Oh,
spine
yeah.
right behind there?
I mean, if he nicked the spine, that dude's paralyzed.
Yeah.
Done.
Anyway,
Also, what happened to Grandma?
all right. So we've
We
all
don't talk
agreed
about
that
grandma.
the three of us agree this movie passes the remote control test.
Yeah.
The three of us
Mhm.
agree that this movie is exceptionally enjoyable for some reason or another. Carol owns it. Carol likes to watch it. She loves the soundtrack.
Mhm.
Jason loves this
Oh.
movie. I love this movie. I will watch it from whatever point it is at, anytime I find it on, even if it has commercials. But I think that we all agree that we can understand why the critics didn't like it at first.
Mhm.
What I don't understand is why it's so highly rated now.
Nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because, yeah, it's up to a freaking 70 on Rotten Tomatoes.
It's nostalgia. It's totally nostalgia.
It's
It's a bunch
nostalgia.
of people. It's a bunch of critics who were teenagers when this came out, who have watched it continually through their life now saying, "Oh my God, it's so wonderful."
Okay.
Well, and I think too that a lot of the people who have been watching this since it hit video and over the years are taking more time with it to read, deeper into it than your average film audience would have been able to. You go to a movie theater, you're not going to sit there and go multiple times, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times for every movie that hits the theater. You're going to go once or twice and then be done with it, because frankly, even back then, that shit was expensive. But once it hits video and you can watch it whenever you want, you can really start breaking it down and analyzing it.
Hey, Jason.
So I
you
think
need
that's
to
a
check
big
the
thing
chat.
of it too.
Check the chat. Somebody's
Plus, I
mouthing
have
off.
to say, critics now are looking at it from a standpoint of having Highlander 2 and 3 and an entire series. So, I mean,
Ouch.
if you're taking
Damn.
Highlander just as itself, I can absolutely see why the critics would trash it.
So, Highlander 2 is a terrible film. It is
Oh, yeah.
objectively terrible.
Yes.
It is
God.
hard to
Unredeemable.
actually get through. Highlander 3, that's the final dimension, right?
Right.
Highlander 3 is not great.
It's not good.
It's not good. It's not unwatchable.
No.
And it did
It
fix quite a
tries.
few things that
Highlander
2
3?
broke. Yeah, the final dimension.
Highlander 3
Highlander-
tries.
Highlander 3 tries. Highlander 4.
Endgame,
and
that's the one with
5.
Adrian Paul, but it fucks up
Right.
Highlander 1.
Yep, because Adrian Paul decided that he was going to take over. And even the first episode of the series, they reduced Conor Mcleod to this whiny little bitch that he decapitates at the end of the episode just to get his power. And it was Christopher Lambert in the pilot episode playing Conor McLeod.
But
Yeah, I
anyway,
haven't watched the TV show, so
and there was also a cartoon.
Yes, and there was also an anime. There was an anime.
But all right, I think that we have
these
talked
were
this one to
weird.
death.
All these R-rated films getting cartoons.
Yes.
Hey, you know what? I feel jaded that there was never a Friday the 13th cartoon.
I thought there was.
Nope. There was a comic book.
I have a distinct picture in my head of Jason animated.
That's because you played the 8-bit NES game. But there was not a animated Friday the 13th, I promise you. Now, there have been references, particularly in like Scooby-Doo and whatnot, back to Friday the 13th. But there was never an actual animated Friday the 13th Jason Voorhees show. Don't get me started on Friday the 13th. I can go longer than
you're
Highlander.
the expert on that one, so I will.
Yes, you are the expert. Okay, well, I think that about wraps this up. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And if you made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe.